You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
But, so Kevin Asplund, had clearly lost the first two rounds. He had taken a lot of punishment. His eye was completely closed. He was disappointed. I think to a certain degree Brett Rogers was disappointed. He wanted to get a TKO win by ground and pound or knock Asplund out. But I don't have a problem with that. After 10 minutes and the way the fight was going, I think the bigger issue with Joachim Spirit Wolf and Marius Jaromskis is the fact that a lot of people thought that Spirit Wolf was winning that fight. That's maybe why that seemed harsh.
Yeah, I agree there. And you're right. There was really no chance that Asplund was coming back to win on Rogers at that point, except in the mind of Asplund, because it was such a personal, bitter grudge between the two of them. That whole story that was shown before the fight took place about how his wife and his wife were best friends, and there was some sort of fire that broke out on their back porch, and now they're not friends anymore because the porch burned down. It was almost a pro wrestling story, really. It's like, wow, this is a real legitimate gripe between these two men.
What I'm really proud of in Bellator, extremely proud of, is that we never manufacture rivalries, because I think we all know that by and large there's a tremendous amount of respect for fighters, and very rarely is it personal. So on the few occasions when it is personal, I think it's fun to tell that story. And, Rogers had lived at Asplund's house. They were everyday training partners for over 3 years. They were extremely close friends. Their wives were best friends. And for all of that to go to pieces, and then you're fighting in Bellator, that to me is a really interesting storyline. That's so much better than manufacturing these fake storylines. I love the fact in Bellator that we're honest, and that we never create any hype or any level of animosity where there's none. But when there is, man, we're going to put it front and center, because that was clearly the storyline.
Well, now on that note, I have to ask you about the whole crossover between TNA and Bellator for King Mo. Now, obviously, on the TNA side of things, they're going to have to manufacture some storylines for him to advance his pro wrestling career. But when he comes to Bellator, it's going to be all business. So where do you think the line's going to be drawn on that?
It's all business. It's two separate careers. And, for an American and a Canadian audience, I think this seems kind of strange. But if you look at MMA from Japan, even now, but especially in the 1990s with fighters like Akira Maeda and Kazushi Sakuraba and Tiger Mask, guys would move seamlessly back and forth. I mean, we've definitely had a few in this sport. Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar, Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn entered his first UFC wearing the NWA heavyweight title belt. The commentators weren't really sure what he was wearing, but, he was an active pro wrestler and the NWA heavyweight champion at the time. I think you can move seamlessly. We're not trying to trick anybody. When he's in MMA, he's a fighter. When he's in pro wrestling, he's doing works in pro wrestling, and he's playing more of a character. I love it. I love the cross-promotion. I hope that we do more and more with Impact on Spike, and I hope they ask me to be a guest commentator sometime, because, again, I was a huge pro wrestling fan from the time I was a little kid, and it would be a thrill for me to get to do that. I don't plan on phasing out and going to pro wrestling as a career, but it would be fun to sit in on one of those shows. And if we draw more people to Bellator, more people to MMA, because King Mo Lawal is an Impact and he's exposing a new audience to our promotion and our sport, man, all the better for it. Because no one's trying to trick anybody. No one's saying that something's real when it's not, or trying to cross-promote. This is just a really unique personality who's able to do both.
Yeah, and it's great to me how that relationship has grown over the years, because when I talked to Bjorn at the show in Memorial Hall in Kansas City, he had just within the last 2 weeks been on Impact Wrestling as a commentator. It's frustrating for me to see it held up in limbo that Bellator can't be on Spike yet for another 6 months.
Well, you're preaching to the choir on that one, but we're counting down to January, and I've said it before. We're a Spike show that's just not on Spike TV right now. We're on MTV2, we're on Epix, and we're on Spike.com. But we're a Spike show. We have the full production support and backing of Spike, starting with Scott Fishman, our network executive producer, Kevin Kay, our fantastic president of Spike, who used to be a writer for David Letterman. I mean, how cool is that? The president of a network used to be a staff writer for Letterman. It's a really cool channel, and we're doing a Spike show, and contractually we start in January, and I think that a lot of people who just have never been able to watch us or weren't really sure, I think they're going to get switched on, and I think they're really going to like the product. I mean, to me, I'm all about growing the sport. I'm not pitting us against rivalry with the UFC or with anybody else. to me, be a fan of MMA. And if you're a fan of MMA, it means you watch all the fights and all the sports, and you don't differentiate and you don't play favorites. Be a fan of the sport. And I think a lot of people who know Bellator and for whatever reason haven't elected to watch us, they're going to start watching us in January when we move to Spike.
Yeah, and of course, you've got to have some sort of opportunity at some point for Kurt Angle to show up on both shows. I mean, the Olympic gold medalist showing up on Bellator, even if he's just doing commentary, that would be, for both a pro wrestling and an MMA fan, that would be a dream come true.
Oh, I would completely welcome that. I really would. And I was at a Impact show in Kansas City. It was a non-televised show back in March, right at the beginning of season number 6, and I was hanging out backstage with the guys, and the bumps that they take. People say pro wrestling is fake. Of course it's fake, but it's fake in the sense that the outcome is predetermined. It's not fake in the fact that these guys are putting their bodies on the line and they're doing very hard falls. And I think in a lot of ways what they do is much more dangerous for your health than MMA.
Well, I want to ask if Paul Daley's opponent's been confirmed. Is it Yoshiyuki Yoshida?
I'm sorry?
Is Paul Daley fighting Yoshiyuki Yoshida at Bellator 72?
All I know about this fight, I don't think that we've confirmed an opponent yet. If something's come out, it slipped past me. I don't think we have an opponent yet. I even asked when I read the off-air card, which I write, can I say Paul Daley's opponent? And I was told we're still working on it. So what I know is that Paul Daley is making his Bellator debut on July 20th. I don't know who the opponent is going to be. I'm really excited to see Paul Daley. Extremely excited. I think it'll be one fight for him, and then he goes into the tournament in season number 7, and that's a big signing for Bellator. I mean, we've talked about Brett Rogers. How cool is that? Marlon Sandro was a big signing. He's a huge signing, Paul Daley. If I can throw a plug in there, what I will tell you is in Kansas City, I would love for both of you guys to attend, is this ABC-approved Judges and Referees MMA seminar that I'm putting on in Kansas City August 4th and 5th, which will be instructed by Rob Hines. And if we can just talk about that for a moment, because I think it's going to be a pretty cool thing. And Omaha's not that far of a drive, if you know. I've got a bunch of Nebraska people coming down. In fact, Brian Dunn, the Nebraska Athletic State Commissioner, is going to be in attendance, and a lot of Nebraska officials. It's going to be a pretty cool gathering of active judges and referees in MMA, a lot of people who are trying to get into the sport. And when you apply for a state license or a provincial license in Canada, you need this certification from the ABC from these courses. And Rob Hines is a phenomenal instructor, and I'm really, really looking forward to this. I'm just putting it on, then I'm going to take the classes myself and try to get the certification and pass the test. But it's going to be a cool time.